On the western edge of the vast Pacific Ocean lies a chain of beautiful islands, scattered like pearls on a canvas of deep blue. This is Japan, a land of captivating contradictions, where ancient traditions and modern civilization collide and harmonize. Its history unfolds like a dramatic epic poem, filled with moments as brilliant as cherry blossoms and transformations as fierce as storms. From the mists of mythological beginnings, through the feudal ages echoing with the clash of samurai swords, to the wave of modernization that embraced the world, and finally to its status as a contemporary nation blending technology and culture, this land has witnessed countless compelling stories. Let us now part the veils of time, follow the footprints of history, and step together into this magnificent panorama spanning millennia, exploring Japan's long journey from antiquity to the modern age. Chapter 1. The Dawn of Civilization, Jomon, Yayoi, and Kofun periods. The history of the Japanese archipelago stretches back to the Paleolithic era, but its distinct cultural beginnings emerge with the Jomon period, starting around 16,000 years ago. This era is named after its unique Jomon pottery, characterized by cord-marked patterns pressed or rolled onto the surface, exuding a primitive vitality. The Jomon people lived by hunting, fishing, and gathering, constructing pit dwellings and forming small settlements. Despite their relatively basic lifestyle, Jomon culture persisted for over 10,000 years, demonstrating remarkable adaptability and stability. At the Sanai Maruyama site in Aomori Prefecture, excavations revealed large-scale, organized Jomon villages, even uncovering remnants of large wooden structures and ritual sites. This challenges the simplistic view of Jomon society, proving the existence of considerable social complexity. The Jomon people cultivated a rich spiritual world, evidenced by unearthed dogu, clay figurines, of diverse forms, some mysterious and grotesque, others radiating maternal warmth, believed to be religious objects used in prayers for fertility, bountiful harvests, or protection from calamities. Around the 10th to 4th centuries BCE, a new cultural wave flowed into the Japanese islands from the Asian continent, primarily via the Korean peninsula, ushering in the Yayoi period. The most significant transformation was the introduction and spread of wet rice cultivation. This not only changed the primary food source, but also profoundly reshaped social structures. Paddy field farming required irrigation, cooperation, and settled life, leading to the formation of larger, more permanent villages. As agricultural productivity increased, the population grew, and society began to stratify, giving rise to surplus goods and wealth disparity. The use of metal tools is another defining feature of the Yayoi period. Bronze artifacts such as mirrors, bells, dotaku, and swords were initially introduced and primarily used for rituals and symbols of authority. Later, iron tools and weapons arrived, greatly enhancing agricultural efficiency and military capability. Yayoi settlements, like the famous Yashinagari site in Saga Prefecture, often feature defensive moats and fences, suggesting escalating conflicts between communities. Society began evolving towards early state formations, with small political entities known as kuni, states, or chiefdoms, emerging across the land. The Great Disturbance of Wa, mentioned in the Chinese Book of the Later Han, followed by the story of Queen Himiko of Yamatai sending envoys to the Wei dynasty court, reflects the social turmoil and rise of regional powers in the late Yayoi period. Himiko, with her mystical shamanistic practices and political acumen, unified several Wa tribes, her existence demonstrating that women could hold significant political power in early Japan. Following the Yayoi period, from the mid-3rd century CE to around the 7th century, Japan entered the Kofun period. Its most striking characteristic is the proliferation of large, keyhole-shaped burial mounds, kofun, particularly the Zenpo Kunfun. These massive tombs were not only symbols of power and wealth, but also tangible evidence of the expanding influence and consolidation of the ruling elite, the Gozoku, powerful clans. Among them, the Daisen Kofun in Osaka Prefecture, attributed to Emperor Nintoku, is one of the largest burial mounds in the world. Its construction demanded immense labor and resources, showcasing the formidable power of the rulers in the Yamato region at the time. Grave goods found within these mounds are abundant, including bronze mirrors, jade ornaments, weapons, armor, and numerous hanawa. Hanawa are reddish-brown terracotta figures in various forms: houses, tools, animals, and, most commonly, human figures like warriors, priestesses, and farmers. They're thought to have replaced human sacrifices and provide valuable insights into the society, clothing, and beliefs of the era. It was during the Kofun period that the Yamato polity, centered in the Kinai region, present-day Nara and Osaka areas, gradually rose to prominence. Through conquest, alliances, and intermarriage, it extended its influence over much of Japan. The rulers of the Yamato state were known as Okimi, Great Kings. They maintained control through a combination of kinship ties and the Ujikabane system, clan hierarchy, while actively absorbing advanced culture and technology from the Korean peninsula and mainland China. The introduction of writing, Confucianism, Buddhism, and various crafts like su-ware pottery techniques had a profound impact on Japanese society. The arrival of Buddhism, in particular, though initially sparking conflict between native Shinto adherents, like the Mononoke clan, and pro-Buddhist factions, like the Soga clan, was eventually embraced by the ruling class. It gradually integrated with indigenous beliefs, becoming a crucial element in shaping Japanese culture. Towards the end of the Kofun period, the Yamato polity grew increasingly centralized, laying the groundwork for the transition to the Ritsuryo state system. This era marked Japan's critical transformation from scattered tribal societies to a unified early state, a time brimming with the accumulation of power and the clash of civilizations. Chapter 2: Establishment of the Ritsuryo state and the flourishing of classical culture, Osaka, Nara, and Heian periods. The 7th century opened a new chapter in Japanese history. By the late Kofun period, the Soga clan had become excessively powerful, dominating the court and provoking resentment from the imperial family and other clans. In 645 CE, Prince Nakano-Oi, later Emperor Tenji, and Nakatomi no Kamatari, founder of the Fujiwara clan, orchestrated the Ishii incident, assassinating the Soga leader Soga no Irika and initiating the pivotal Taika reforms. Modeled after the Sui and Tang dynasties of China, these reforms aimed to establish a centralized bureaucratic state under the emperor. Key measures included abolishing private land and serfdom, in favor of the Kochi common system, public land, public people, reorganizing local administration, provinces, districts, villages, implementing the Honden Shuji system, land allocation based on population, and establishing a unified tax system, Soyocho. Although the Taika reforms faced significant resistance and were not fully realized, they marked Japan's systematic effort to adopt advanced continental institutions and represented a milestone in the transition from a clan-based society to a Ritsuryo, legal code-based state. Reforms continued through the latter half of the 7th and early 8th centuries, culminating in the promulgation of the Taiho Code in 701 under Emperor Monmu. This code formally established the Ritsuryo state, defining everything from the central government structure, Council of State, Daijokan, and 8 ministries, Hasho, social hierarchy, land tenure, taxation, and legal systems. The emperor, as head of state and chief priest, held supreme authority, ruling through layers of bureaucracy. To better implement the Ritsuryo system and emulate the Tang capital Chang'an, the capital was moved to Haijokyo, present-day Nara, in 710. The Nara period, 710 to 794, was the first era in which a truly centralized state operated stably in Japan. Haijokyo was a grand city laid out on a grid pattern like Chang'an, serving as the political, economic, and cultural heart of the nation. During this time, Buddhism received immense imperial patronage and reached unprecedented heights. Emperor Shomu famously declared himself a servant of the 3 treasures, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, and commissioned the construction of provincial temples, Kokubunji and Kokubunaji, throughout the country, as well as the magnificent Todaiji Temple and its colossal bronze statue of the Vairocana Buddha, Daibutsu, in Nara, praying for national peace and prosperity. Buddhist art flourished, leaving behind exquisite sculptures, murals, and architecture. Simultaneously, to legitimize imperial rule and chronicle the nation's history, Japan's first official histories, the Kojiki, Record of Ancient Matters, 712, and the Nihon Shoki, Chronicles of Japan, 720, were compiled. They systematically organized Japanese myths, legends, and early history, forming the foundation of Japan's historical narrative. Furthermore, the Manyoshu, collection of 10,000 leaves, Japan's oldest extant poetry anthology, was likely compiled towards the end of the Nara period. It contains over 4,500 waka poems from all social strata, from emperors and nobles to soldiers and peasants, offering a direct and heartfelt glimpse into their lives and emotions. However, the implementation of the Ritsuryo system was fraught with difficulties. The Honden land allocation system became increasingly difficult to maintain due to population growth and challenges in land reclamation. Nobles and Buddhist temples expanded their private estates, shown through various means, gradually eroding the public land system. To maintain revenue, the government imposed heavy taxes and labor burdens on peasants, leading to widespread desertion and growing social unrest. Moreover, Buddhist institutions in Nara grew overly powerful, even interfering in politics. Seeking to escape the influence of the old capital and reinvigorate imperial authority, Emperor Kanmu moved the capital to Heian-kyo, present-day Kyoto, in 794. This marked the beginning of the Heian period, 794-1185, which lasted for nearly 4 centuries. In the early Heian period, Emperor Kanmu continued reforms, consolidating finances, and dispatching Sakunu no Tamuramuro to subjugate the Emishire people in the northeast, expanding the empire's territory. Over time, however, the Ritsuryo system gradually weakened and transformed. The Honden system collapsed entirely and the Shon manorial estate economy became dominant. Nobles and temples controlling vast estates grew increasingly powerful, while the central government's control diminished. Politically, the Fujiwara clan skillfully used marriage politics, securing positions as regents, Sessho, for child emperors, and chancellors, Kenpaku, for adult emperors, for generations. This regency government, Second Seiji, effectively sidelined the emperor's actual power. During the time of Fujiwara no Michinaga, early 11th century, the clan's influence reached its zenith. His famous poem, "This world, I think, is my world. Like the full moon I shine, uncovered by any cloud," perfectly captured his immense power and satisfaction. Despite political struggles and institutional decline, the Heian period witnessed an extraordinary flourishing of classical Japanese culture. After moving to Heian-kyo, Japan gradually shed its dependence on Tang Chinese models and developed its own distinct national style, known as kakufabunka. The most significant development was the creation and popularization of the kana syllabaris. Hiragana, derived from cursive forms of Chinese characters, and katakana, derived from components of characters, made writing Japanese much easier and spurred the development of literature, especially by women. Court ladies of the Heian period, such as Murasaki Shikibu and Sei Shonagon, used their elegant and refined prose to create immortal literary masterpieces. Murasaki Shikibu's The Tale of Genji, Genji Monogatari, is widely considered the world's first great novel. Centered on the life of the shining prince Genji, it portrays the refined lifestyles, complex emotions, and power dynamics of the Heian aristocracy, imbued with a profound aesthetic sensibility known as mono no aware, the pathos of things. Sei Shonagon's collection of essays, The Pillow Book, Makura no Sashi, captures witty observations, personal reflections, and charming vignettes of court life with keen insight and refreshing style. Waka poetry also thrived, with imperial anthologies like the Koken Wakashu establishing its central place in Japanese literature. In the arts, Yamato-e painting, characterized by vibrant colors, soft lines, and depictions of Japanese landscapes, customs, and narrative tales, like the Genji Monogatari and Maki Scroll, replaced Chinese-style painting, Kara-e, as the mainstream. Architecturally, the Shindanzakuri style, reflecting aristocratic tastes and emphasizing harmony with nature, matured. Religiously, the monks Seicho and Kukai introduced the Tendai and Shingon, esoteric Buddhist, schools from China, respectively, establishing major monastic centers on Mount Hai and Mount Koya that profoundly influenced later Japanese Buddhism. Pure Land Buddhism, with its promise of rebirth in the Western paradise, also gained widespread popularity among both nobles and commoners. However, beneath the elegance of the Heian era lurked instability. The decline of central authority led to deteriorating public order in the provinces, with banditry becoming rampant. To protect their estates and maintain local order, some nobles and temples began hiring armed retainers, gradually forming a professional warrior class, the samurai. Initially serving as agents of the court and aristocracy, these provincial warrior bands grew stronger and eventually began intervening in central politics. During the period of cloistered rule, Insei, starting in the late 11th century, retired emperors attempted to use warrior power to counter the Fujiwara regents, inadvertently accelerating the rise of the samurai. Ultimately, in the mid-12th century Hagen Rebellion, 1156, and Heiji Rebellion, 1159, warrior groups, particularly the Taira, Haika, and Minamoto, Genji, clans, emerged as decisive forces on the political stage. Taira no Kayamori seized power after the Heiji Rebellion, establishing the first warrior-dominated government and marking the essential end of aristocratic rule. The late Heian period culminated in the fierce Genpei War between the Taira and Minamoto clans, with the Minamoto emerging victorious. A new era, dominated by the warrior class, was about to dawn. Chapter 3. The Rise and Fall of Warrior Regimes, Kamakura, Muromachi, and Warring States periods. The Genpei War concluded with the decisive victory of the Minamoto clan. After annihilating the Taira clan at the Battle of Danura in 1185, Minamoto no Yoritamo became the most powerful figure in Japan. Instead of establishing his government in Kyoto, he set up his headquarters, the Bakufu, literally tent government, referring to the shogun's administration, in his power base of Kamakura, present-day Kamakura City, Kanagawa Prefecture. In 1192, Yoritamo was appointed Seitai Shogun, barbarian subduing generalissimo, by the retired Emperor Go-Toba, formally establishing the Kamakura shogunate. This marked the birth of Japan's first national government effectively controlled by the warrior class, initiating nearly 7 centuries of samurai rule, known as the Kamakura period, 1185 to 1333. The establishment of the Kamakura shogunate created a dual polity, with the imperial court, emperor and aristocracy, in Kyoto coexisting alongside the shogunate, shogun and warriors, in Kamakura. Although the emperor remained the nominal head of state with the authority to appoint the shogun, real political, military, and economic power rested with the shogunate. Yoritamo established key administrative organs, the Samurai Dokoro, Board of Retainers, overseeing military and police affairs of the vassals, the Mandakoro, Administrative Board, handling finances and political affairs, and the Manchujo, Board of Inquiry, managing judicial matters. He appointed Shugo, military governors, responsible for provincial military and police powers, and Jido, land stewards, managing tax collection and administration on estates and public lands throughout the country, extending the shogunate's control to the local level and effectively managing the warrior class, the gokunin, housemen or vassals. A feudal relationship based on goan, the shogun's benefaction, granting or confirming land rights, and hoko, the vassal service and loyalty to the shogun, formed the core bond between the shogun and his retainers. After Yoritamo's death, his sons Yori and Sanetomo served as shoguns, but real power gradually fell into the hands of their maternal relatives, the Hojo clan. The Hojo did not seek the shogunate itself, but established the position of shikin regent to assist the shogun, effectively wielding supreme power in what became known as the Hojo Regency. In 1221, retired Emperor Go-Toba, dissatisfied with the shogunate's dominance and attempting to restore imperial power, launched the Jokyu War. However, the rebellion was swiftly crushed by shogunate forces led by Hojo Yashitoki. Following this victory, the shogunate exiled the participating emperors and retired emperors and, for the first time, established the Rokuhara Tandai, Rokuhara deputies, in Kyoto to strengthen surveillance over the court and western Japan, further consolidating the shogunate's authority. During the regency of Hojo Yasutoki, 1224 to 1242, Japan's first warrior legal code, the Gozaibai Shikamoku Formulary of Adjudications, also known as the Jōai Code, was enacted. Comprising 51 practical articles, it focused on regulating the rights, duties, and legal procedures among samurai, serving as a blueprint for subsequent warrior law and marking the maturation of warrior governance. In the mid-Kamakura period, Japan faced a formidable external threat, the Mongol invasions. Kublai Khan, after unifying China under the Yuan dynasty, sent envoys demanding Japan's submission, but these demands were flatly rejected by the Hojo regent Tokumune. Consequently, the Yuan dynasty launched two massive expeditions against Japan in 1274, the Bunei War, and 1281, the Koan War. In both campaigns, although Japanese samurai were often outmatched in terms of weaponry and tactics, they managed to repel the invaders through tenacious resistance and advantageous terrain, especially the defensive stone walls built before the second invasion. During the Koan War, a massive typhoon destroyed much of the Yuan fleet. The Japanese attributed this salvation to divine intervention, calling it the kamikaze, divine wind. While the successful defense against the Mongols greatly boosted Japan's national consciousness, it placed a heavy financial burden on the shogunate. Rewarding the samurai who fought bravely required vast resources, but as it was a defensive war, no new lands were acquired for distribution. This led to widespread dissatisfaction among many Gokunin. The wars also exacerbated socioeconomic instability, with many samurai falling into debt. The shogunate's attempts to alleviate the situation through tokusirei, debt cancellation edicts, had limited success and further disrupted the economy. The foundations of the shogunate's rule began to crumble. Culturally, the Kamakura period saw the rise of warrior culture. The values of simplicity, martial prowess, loyalty, honor, and practicality, which formed the precursors to later Bushido, the way of the warrior, began to take shape. Buddhism also experienced new developments. Unlike the aristocratic Buddhism of the Heian period, several new schools emerged, appealing to commoners and samurai alike, collectively known as Kamakura New Buddhism. Honen founded the Pure Land School, Jodoshu, emphasizing salvation through chanting the name of Amida Buddha, Namu Amida Butsu. His disciple Shinran established the true Pure Land School, Jodo Shinshu or Ikkoshu, advocating the evil person is the true object of Amida's salvation. Nichiren founded the Nichiren School, promoting the chanting of the title of the Lotus Sutra, Namu Myoho Renji Kyo. Zen Buddhism, particularly the Rinzai and Soto schools, was also introduced from China and gained favor among the samurai class, its emphasis on discipline, self-reliance, and direct experience resonating with their mindset. These new Buddhist sects spread widely among the populace and had a lasting impact on the Japanese spiritual landscape. In literature, military tales, Gunki Monogatari, like the tale of the Heike Monogatari, vividly depicting the dramatic rise and fall of the Terra clan and the impermanence of worldly affairs, became representative literary forms of the era. By the early 14th century, the shogunate's crisis deepened. Emperor Go-Daigo, determined to overthrow the Kamakura shogunate and restore direct imperial rule, rallied anti-shogun forces like Kusunoki Masashige and Nidhi Yashisada, launching the Genko War. Although the initial attempt failed and Go-Daigo was exiled, Ashikaga Takauji, a powerful general originally loyal to the shogunate, switched sides and joined the emperor's cause. In 1333, Takauji's forces captured Kamakura, leading to the downfall of the Hojo clan and the end of the Kamakura shogunate. Emperor Go-Daigo successfully established the short-lived Kenmu Restoration, 1333 to 1336, attempting to revive the ancient imperial-centered Ritsuryo system. However, his policies failed to satisfy the interests of the warrior class, particularly alienating key figures like Ashikaga Takauji, leading to widespread discontent among samurai. Soon, Takauji rebelled, entered Kyoto in 1336, and installed Emperor Komyo from a rival imperial line. Emperor Go-Daigo fled south to Yoshino with the imperial regalia, establishing a rival southern court. This marked the beginning of the Nanbokucho period of the northern and southern courts, 1336 to 1392, with two competing imperial courts existing simultaneously. In 1338, Ashikaga Takauji was appointed shogun by the northern court and established the Muromachi shogunate in Kyoto, named after the Muromachi district where his residence was located, inaugurating the Muromachi period, 1336 to 1573. Compared to its Kamakura predecessor, the Muromachi shogunate had a less stable power base. Being situated in Kyoto, the shoguns were directly influenced by courtly culture, leading to more luxurious lifestyles and entanglement in complex political intrigues. In the provinces, the shogo, military governors, appointed during the Kamakura period steadily increased their power, evolving into powerful regional lords known as shogo daimyo, who controlled one or more provinces and possessed significant military and economic strength. They governed their domains with considerable autonomy, sometimes even banding together to challenge the shogunate, making central control far weaker than under the Kamakura regime. The Muromachi shogunate reached its peak under the third shogun, Ashikaga Yoshimitsu, reigned 1368 to 1394. Yoshimitsu not only succeeded in reunifying the northern and southern courts in 1392, ending the long schism, but also actively promoted trade with Ming China through the tally trade system, Kengoboki, generating substantial profits and bolstering the shogunate's finances. He built the magnificent Kitayama Palace in Kyoto, of which the Golden Pavilion, Kinkakuji, is the most famous surviving structure, showcasing the shogunate's authority and fostering the Kitayama culture, which blended courtly and warrior aesthetics. However, after Yoshimitsu's death, the shogunate's authority gradually declined. The power of the shogo daimyo continued to grow, leading to increasing conflicts among themselves and with the shogunate. In 1467, disputes over the shogunal succession and rivalries between powerful shogo daimyo families, primarily Hosokawa Katsumoto and Yamane Suzan, erupted into the Unin War. This devastating civil war lasted for 11 years, turning Kyoto into ashes and completely shattering the authority of the Muromachi shogunate. The Unin War ushered in the Sengoku period, Warring States period, roughly 1467-1573/1590, an era of intense internal warfare and social upheaval. The phenomenon of Gekkoukujo, the low overthrowing the high, became rampant, as old shogo daimyo were often supplanted by their vassals or local warriors, kokujin, transforming into more powerful and independent Sengoku daimyo. These warlords ruled their domains with an iron fist, enacting their own laws, bunkakuho, building up their armies, strengthening their economies, and engaging in fierce wars of expansion against each other. Famous Sengoku daimyo include Takeda Shingen of Kai, Yasuji Kenshin of Ekigo, Oda Nobunaga of Owari, Tokugawa Ieyasu of Mikawa, Mori Motonari of the Chigoku region, and Date Masamian of the Tohoku region. It was an age of heroes, chaos, and profound transformation. Despite the incessant warfare, the Muromachi and Sengoku periods also witnessed significant economic and cultural developments. Advances in agricultural technology, coupled with the growth of handicrafts and commerce, led to increased productivity. Commercial cities like Sakai and Hakata emerged, often governed autonomously by wealthy merchants, kanin, becoming vibrant centers of economic and cultural exchange. A monetary economy became more widespread. Culturally, following Yoshimitsu's Kitayama culture, the 8th shogun Ashikaga Yoshimasa fostered the Higashiyama culture, characterized by refinement, simplicity, and quiet elegance, epitomized by the Silver Pavilion, Ginkakuji. Zen Buddhist philosophy continued to exert a strong influence on the arts. Distinctly Japanese arts like the tea ceremony, Seido, refined by Murata Juko, Takino-ju, and Sun-no Rikyu, flower arranging, Kado or Ikebana, associated with Ikenabo Sunkei, no drama, perfected by Kanami and his son Zimi, and linked verse poetry, Renga, championed by Sogi, were established and developed during this era. Ink painting, Suibo Kuga, reached new heights, with artists like Sessha Toyo. With rising literacy and the emergence of a townsman class, popular literature like Otogizashi, short illustrated stories, gained favor. In foreign relations, besides the official tally trade with Ming China, private trade and smuggling, sometimes involving Wacko pirates, were also active. In 1543, Portuguese merchants shipwrecked on Tanegashima Island introduced firearms, teppo, to Japan. This new weaponry dramatically changed Japanese warfare and accelerated the process of unification. In 1549, the Jesuit missionary Francis Xavier arrived, initiating the spread of Christianity, Christian, and the influx of Western culture. The turbulent Sengoku period, while witnessing the collapse of the old order, also nurtured the forces that would lead to unification and a new era. Chapter 4: National Unification and the Establishment of Early Modern Society, Azuchi Momoyama and Edo periods. Amidst the chaos of the Warring States period, three extraordinary figures emerged successively to end the prolonged division and achieve the reunification of Japan. They were Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu. The first to rise to prominence was Oda Nobunaga, 1534 to 1582, a minor daimyo from Owari Province, western Aichi Prefecture. Nobunaga rapidly expanded his power through exceptional military genius, innovative thinking that defied convention, and ruthless methods. His stunning victory against the powerful Imagawa Yoshimoto in the Battle of Okahazama, 1560, achieved through a surprise attack with vastly inferior numbers, brought him national fame. He adopted the motto Tenkafubu, rule the realm by military force, aiming to unify Japan by conquest. He eagerly adopted and deployed firearms on a large scale, creating formidable arquebus units. His decisive victory over the famed Takeda cavalry at the Battle of Nagashino, 1575, demonstrated the power of these new tactics. Nobunaga also implemented the Rikichirakuza policy, abolishing market guilds and toll barriers to promote free trade and boost his economic strength. He showed no mercy to forces obstructing his unification efforts, such as the powerful armed Buddhist monasteries like Enryakuji on Mount High, which he brutally suppressed. In 1568, Nobunaga installed Ashikaga Yoshiaki in Kyoto as a puppet shogun, gaining control over the central Kinai region. In 1573, he exiled Yoshiaki when the latter attempted to resist him, effectively ending the Muromachi shogunate. By 1582, Nobunaga had largely unified central Japan, and his conquests seemed nearing completion. However, in that year, while resting at Honnoji Temple in Kyoto, he was betrayed and attacked by his general Akechi Mitsuhide, forcing him to commit suicide in the Honnoji incident. Oda Nobunaga's unification project came to an abrupt end. Nobunaga's sudden death created a power vacuum, sparking fierce struggles among his retainers. Ultimately, Hashiba Hideyoshi, later Toyotomi Hideyoshi, 1537 to 1598, a man of humble origins but exceptional talent, swiftly defeated Akechi Mitsuhide and gradually outmaneuvered or subdued Nobunaga's other chief vassals and sons, inheriting Nobunaga's mission of unification. Using superb political skill and military prowess, Hideyoshi continued the campaigns. He subjugated the major daimyo of Shikoku and Kyushu. In 1590, he forced the powerful Hojo clan of the Kanto region to surrender and subsequently secured the allegiance of Date Masamune and other daimyo in the Tohoku region. With this, Toyotomi Hideyoshi completed the formal unification of Japan, ending over a century of civil war. He was granted the surname Toyotomi by the imperial court and appointed Kenpaku, imperial regent, and Daijo Daijin, Grand Minister of State, reaching the pinnacle of power. To consolidate his rule, Hideyoshi implemented several crucial policies. He conducted nationwide land surveys, Taiko Kenshi, measuring farmland, assessing productivity, Kakadaka, yield measured in koku of rice, and clarifying land ownership. This became the basis for taxation and defining the status and income of daimyo and samurai, strengthening central control over land and peasantry. He also issued the Sword Hunt Edict, Katanagari, confiscating weapons from peasants and monks to enforce a strict separation between warriors and farmers, Haino Bunri, prevent peasant uprisings, and solidify the ruling status of the samurai class. These measures laid essential groundwork for the subsequent Tokugawa shogunate. In his later years, driven by ambition and perhaps a desire to divert domestic tensions, Hideyoshi launched two invasions of Korea, the Bunroku and Kicho campaigns, 1592 to 1598. However, facing tenacious resistance from Korean forces, aided by Ming China, both invasions ended in failure, consuming vast resources and exacerbating internal conflicts within Japan's ruling elite. In 1598, Toyotomi Hideyoshi died during the Second Korean Campaign, leaving his young son Hideyori unable to maintain control over the vast regime. After Hideyoshi's death, tensions rapidly escalated between Tokugawa Ieyasu, 1543 to 1616, the most powerful of Hideyoshi's vassals, and factions loyal to Hideyori, led by Ishida Mitsunari. In 1600, the decisive Battle of Sekigahara, in modern Gifu Prefecture, took place. Ieyasu, leveraging his experience, strategic acumen, and formidable alliances, the Eastern Army, decisively defeated Mitsunari's Western Army. The victory at Sekigahara cemented Ieyasu's dominance. In 1603, Tokugawa Ieyasu was appointed shogun by the court and established a shogunate in Edo, modern Tokyo, marking the beginning of the Edo period, 1603 to 1867, also known as the Tokugawa period, which would last for over 260 years. Although the Toyotomi clan and its remaining supporters held out in Osaka Castle, Ieyasu finally eliminated them through the Winter Campaign, 1614, and Summer Campaign, 1615, of Osaka, consolidating the rule of the Tokugawa shogunate. The Tokugawa shogunate established a meticulous and stable system of governance designed to ensure long-term peace and order. At the center, the shogun was the supreme ruler, assisted by councils like the Roju, Council of Elders, handling daily administration, Wakadoshiori, junior counselors, Onsuk, inspectors overseeing daimyo, and Metsuke, inspectors overseeing the shogun's direct retainers, Hatamoto and Gokunin. Provincially, the country was divided into the shogunate's direct territories, Tenryo, domains of collateral Tokugawa family branches, Shinpan daimyo, domains of hereditary vassals, Fudai daimyo, loyal before Sekigahara, and domains of outer lords, Tozuma daimyo, who submitted after Sekigahara. The shogunate exercised strict control over the daimyo through regulations like the Byukusho Hado, laws for the military houses, and the Senkenkotai system, alternate attendance. This required daimyo to reside periodically in Edo while leaving their wives and heirs there as hostages. This system not only strengthened shogunal control and drained daimyo finances, but also stimulated the growth of Edo and the development of national transportation and commerce. To maintain social order, the shogunate enforced a rigid hereditary class system, dividing society primarily into samurai, warriors, peasants, artisans, and merchants, Shirno-kyo-sho. The samurai class stood at the top, enjoying special privileges. Outside this hierarchy were the emperor and court nobles, kyochi, Buddhist monks and Shinto priests, and outcast groups known as Eta and Hainen. The shogunate actively promoted Confucianism, particularly the Zhu-shi school, Neo-Confucianism, as the official ideology, emphasizing loyalty, filial piety, social hierarchy, and obedience to bolster feudal rule. Regarding foreign relations, the early Tokugawa shogunate initially adopted a relatively tolerant stance towards foreign trade and Christianity. However, as Christianity spread, the shogunate grew increasingly concerned about its potential to cause social instability and facilitate Western encroachment. Starting in the early 17th century, a series of anti-Christian edicts were issued, leading to brutal persecution of Japanese Christians. Following the suppression of the Shimabara Rebellion, 1637 to 1638, an uprising of primarily Christian peasants led by Amikusa Shiro, the shogunate resolved to sever most ties with the West, with exceptions for the Dutch and Chinese. Between 1633 and 1639, a series of seclusion edicts, Sakura, were promulgated, banning Japanese from traveling abroad, prohibiting overseas Japanese from returning, and severely restricting foreign ships' entry, allowing only Dutch and Chinese merchants limited trade access through the artificial island of Dejima in Nagasaki Harbor. Japan thus entered a period of national isolation, Sakoku, lasting over 2 centuries. While the Sakura policy shielded Japan from direct Western colonialism and maintained internal peace, it also isolated the country from global developments. Nevertheless, within this framework, Japan's domestic economy, society, and culture achieved remarkable progress. The long period of peace fostered agricultural productivity and the flourishing of a commercial economy. Improved transportation networks and vibrant commercial activity led to the prosperity of major cities like Edo, Osaka, and Kyoto, as well as numerous castle towns, Jokamichi, across the country. Osaka became the national center for commodity distribution, known as the kitchen of the realm. The merchant class, kanin, grew increasingly wealthy and influential, fostering a unique urban culture. Edo period culture was diverse and increasingly secular. While the samurai class continued to study Confucianism, Chinese classics, and martial arts, the rise of the kanin class fueled the blossoming of popular culture, particularly during the Jinroku era, late 17th, early 18th C, and the Bunkabunsei era, late 18th, early 19th C. In literature, Ihara Saikaku's Yukiozashi, Tales of the Floating World, depicting townspeople's lives, Matsuo Basho's refined haikai poetry, especially his travelogue Oka no Hozamakai, and Chikamatsu Manzaemon's scripts for jururi, puppet theater, and kabuki became immensely popular. In art, ukiyo-e woodblock prints, colorful depictions of urban life, beautiful women, actors, and landscapes by masters like Hishikawa Muranobu, Kitagawa Utamaro, Katsushika Hokusai, and Utagawa Hiroshige, reached their zenith and later influenced Western Impressionism. In theater, kabuki and jururi, bunraku, became beloved forms of mass entertainment. Intellectually, alongside the officially sanctioned Jushi school, other schools of thought like Wangyangming philosophy, Yumaigaku, ancient learning, Kagaku, emphasizing a return to the original meaning of Confucian classics, and national learning, Kokugaku, focusing on Japanese classics and emphasizing a unique Japanese spirit, with key figures like Kata no Ajimamuro, Kamo no Mabuchi, Motori Norinaga, and Hirata Atsutane emerged. Kokugaku thought played a significant role in the Sano Joi, Revere the Emperor, Expel the Barbarians movement of the late Edo period. Furthermore, through the limited window of Nagasaki, some Japanese began studying Western science and technology, forming the field of Rengaku, Dutch learning, making progress in areas like medicine, astronomy, and geography. However, by the late Edo period, late 18th to mid-19th century, internal contradictions within the Bakuhan system became increasingly apparent. The developing commercial economy challenged the feudal order based on a subsistence economy. Many samurai, especially lower-ranking ones, faced growing poverty, while merchants and wealthy farmers gained economic power. Peasants, burdened by heavy taxes and exploitation, frequently rose up in revolts, Hayakushoiki, and urban poor rioted, Uchikawashi. The shogunate and many domains faced chronic fiscal deficits. Although several reform efforts were undertaken, e.g., the Kyoho, Kansang, and Tempo reforms, they failed to address the fundamental problems. Simultaneously, Western powers began appearing off Japan's coasts, increasing pressure to open the country. Russian, British, and American ships frequently approached Japanese shores, challenging the seclusion policy. Beset by internal decay and external threats, the Tokugawa shogunate's foundations were crumbling, setting the stage for a monumental transformation. Chapter 5: The Wave of Modernization and the Path to Empire, Meiji Restoration, Taisho, and early Showa periods. In the mid-19th century, Japan, long secluded, was finally forced open by powerful external pressure. In 1853, U.S. Navy Commodore Matthew Perry led a squadron of 4 steam warships, dubbed Black Ships by the Japanese, into Edo Bay at Uraga, using the threat of force to demand that Japan open its ports for trade. Under immense military pressure, the shogunate reluctantly signed the Convention of Kanagawa, Treaty of Peace and Amity, with the United States the following year, 1854, opening the ports of Shimoda and Hakodate and granting the U.S. Most Favored Nation status. Britain, Russia, the Netherlands, and France soon followed, imposing similar unequal treaties on Japan. These treaties not only infringed upon Japan's tariff autonomy and judicial sovereignty, extraterritoriality, but also severely disrupted the domestic economy and social order. The arrival of the Black Ships and the signing of unequal treaties sent shockwaves through Japan, igniting a profound sense of national crisis. Some advocated for Kaikoku, opening the country, arguing for learning Western technology to strengthen Japan. Others championed joy, expelling the barbarians, demanding the expulsion of foreigners and the maintenance of seclusion. Discontent with the shogunate's perceived weakness and humiliating diplomacy grew, leading to a resurgence of reverence for the emperor's authority, coalescing into the Sano Joy, revere the emperor, expel the barbarians movement. Powerful domains in southwestern Japan such as Satsuma, modern Kagoshima Prefecture, and Chashu, modern Yamaguchi Prefecture, already harboring dissatisfaction with Tokugawa rule, became centers of the movement for change. Lower-ranking samurai, shurshur or activists, from these domains initially engaged actively in Sano Joy activities, even attacking foreigners and firing on foreign ships. However, after suffering retaliatory bombardments from Western powers, like the Anglo-Satsuma War and the bombardment of Shimonoseki, they realized the impracticality of expulsion. Their focus shifted towards overthrowing the shogunate, Tobaku, and establishing a new government centered on the emperor, aiming to achieve national strength. Fukoku Kyohei, enrich the country, strengthen the military, by adopting Western methods. The Sano Joy movement evolved into an anti-shogun movement. Mediated by figures like Sakamoto Ryoma, the rival domains of Satsuma and Chashu formed the crucial Satsuma-Chashu Alliance, Sacho Alliance, in 1866, uniting against the shogunate. Facing mounting pressure, the 15th shogun, Tokugawa Yoshinobu, attempted a tactical retreat by formally returning administrative authority, Teisei Hoken, to Emperor Meiji in October 1867, hoping to retain significant influence in the anticipated new government. However, the anti-shogun forces were not satisfied. In December 1867, they staged the restoration of imperial rule coup, Osei Fuko, declaring the abolition of the shogunate and the establishment of a new government headed by the emperor. Unwilling to accept defeat, Yoshinobu led former shogunate forces in resistance, but was defeated by the Satsuma Chashu allied army at the Battle of Toba Fushimi in early 1868. The new imperial forces marched eastward, eventually securing the peaceful surrender of Edo Castle, renamed Tokyo. Remaining shogunate resistance in the northeast and Hokkaido, the Boshin War, was subsequently suppressed. The Tokugawa shogunate, which had ruled Japan for over 260 years, finally collapsed. In 1868, the young Emperor Meiji issued the Charter Oath, 5 Articles Oath, outlining the new government's commitment to reform, modernization through Western learning, and broader consultation, marking the beginning of the Meiji Restoration, Meiji Ishin. This was a profound and comprehensive revolution aimed at transforming Japan from a feudal, agrarian society into a modern, industrialized nation-state. Under the slogans Fukoku Kyohei, enrich the country, strengthen the military, Shikusen Kojyo, promote industry, and Banmei Kaika, civilization and enlightenment, the Meiji government implemented a series of radical reforms. Political system reform, abolition of the domains and establishment of prefectures, Heihan Shiken, in 1871, completely dismantling the feudal domain system and placing the entire country under direct central government control. Creation of a modern bureaucratic system modeled on Western examples. Promulgation of the Constitution of the Empire of Japan, Meiji Constitution, in 1889, establishing a constitutional monarchy with the emperor as sovereign and head of state, but also creating an imperial diet composed of a House of Peers and a House of Representatives. While this constitution strongly emphasized imperial sovereignty and granted the military direct access to the emperor, Iyaka Joseon, which paved the way for later militarism, it was Asia's first modern constitution. Economic reform, Shikusen Kojyo eager adoption of Western technology to build a modern industrial base. The government established state-run enterprises, textile mills, arsenals, mines, built railways and telegraph lines, and developed shipping. Later, Many of these enterprises were sold off at low prices to politically connected conglomerates, zaibatsu, such as Mitsui, Mitsubishi, Sumitomo, Yasuda, fostering the growth of private capitalism. Land tax reform, 1873, replaced traditional rice tribute with a fixed monetary tax based on land value, providing stable government revenue and promoting a commercial economy. Military reform, Fukoku Kyohei creation of a modern army, modeled after Germany, and navy, modeled after Britain. Implementation of universal conscription, 1873, to establish a national army. Development of military industries. Social and cultural reform, Bunmei Kaika abolition of the rigid four-class system, samurai, peasants, artisans, merchants, declaring legal equality, though former samurai, shizoku, initially retained some privileges, which were gradually phased out. Establishment of a modern education system with compulsory primary education. Dispatching large missions like the Iwakura mission, 1871 to 1873, to Europe and America to study Western institutions, technology, and culture. Promotion of Western clothing, hairstyles, food, architecture, and lifestyles. Translation of Western works and introduction of Western ideas, Enlightenment thought, liberalism, social Darwinism. The Meiji Restoration achieved remarkable success in just a few decades. Japan rapidly industrialized and modernized, significantly increasing its national power and becoming the first Asian nation to embark on the path of modernization. However, this rapid, top-down transformation also created problems. Peasants faced heavy tax burdens, and the disenfranchised samurai class, shizoku, harbored resentment, leading to events like the Satsuma Rebellion of 1877, led by Seigo Takamori, which was suppressed. The government often ruled autocratically to push through reforms, suppressing movements for popular rights, Jiyuminken undo. Moreover, as national strength grew, Japan's ambitions for overseas expansion intensified. Driven by the goal of enrich the country, strengthen the military, Japan embarked on a path of imperialist expansion. In 1879, it annexed the Ryukyu Kingdom, establishing Okinawa Prefecture. In 1894 to 1895, vying for control over Korea, it waged the First Sino-Japanese War against Qing Dynasty China. Defeating the former Celestial Empire, Japan forced China to sign the Treaty of Shimonoseki, ceding Taiwan and the Penghu Islands, demanding a huge indemnity and recognizing Korean independence, effectively placing it under Japanese influence. This victory greatly fueled Japan's expansionist desires and provided capital for further industrial and military development. In 1904 to 1905, competing with Russia for influence in Manchuria and Korea, Japan fought the Russo-Japanese War. In this conflict, considered the first major victory of an Asian power over a European great power, Japan, despite heavy costs, emerged victorious. It gained Russia's concessions in southern Manchuria and established a protectorate over Korea, which it formally annexed in 1910. The victory in the Russo-Japanese War elevated Japan to the status of a world power but also significantly strengthened militaristic tendencies. During World War I, 1914 to 1918, Japan, citing the Anglo-Japanese alliance, declared war on Germany, swiftly seizing German holdings in China's Shandong province and German-controlled islands in the Pacific. Taking advantage of a European power's preoccupation with the war, Japan intensified its expansion in China, e.g., presenting the 21 demands, and experienced a temporary economic boom, Taisen Keiki. As one of the victorious powers, Japan participated in the Paris Peace Conference, further enhancing its international standing. The period following World War I into the 1920s is known as the Taisho period, 1912 to 1926. Influenced by Western democratic ideas, Japan experienced a phase of relative political liberalism and cultural dynamism, often called Taisho democracy. Party politics became more active. The movement for universal suffrage gained momentum, leading to universal male suffrage in 1925, and social movements, labor, peasant, women's liberation flourished. Urbanization accelerated, and mass culture emerged, with cafes, cinemas, and department stores becoming symbols of a new lifestyle. However, the foundations of Taisho democracy were fragile. Economically, post-war recession, the devastation of the Great Kanto earthquake, 1923, and cyclical crises exacerbated social tensions. Politically, undemocratic forces like the elder statesman Genro, the House of Peers, and the military remained powerful, constraining party cabinets. The Peace Preservation Law of 1925 provided a legal tool for suppressing dissent and paved the way for later fascist rule. Entering the Showa period, 1926 to 1989, especially after the onset of the Great Depression in 1929, Japan's internal contradictions intensified dramatically. The economic crisis severely hit the Japanese economy, particularly devastating rural areas and fueling social unrest. Amidst domestic turmoil and international uncertainty, military fascist forces gained ascendancy. They advocated aggressive expansionism as the solution to domestic problems, pushed for a national total mobilization system, strengthened imperial authority, and rejected party politics and Western liberalism. Radical young officers in the military used assassinations and attempted coups to undermine civilian government. In 1931, the Guangdong Army engineered the Mukden Incident, Manchurian Incident, seizing control of Manchuria and establishing the puppet state of Manchukuo the following year. When the League of Nations condemned this action, Japan withdrew in 1933, becoming increasingly isolated internationally. The May 15th Incident, 1932, in which young naval officers assassinated Prime Minister Inukai Tsuyoshi, marked the end of party cabinet government. The February 26th Incident, 1936, a failed coup attempt by radical army officers, the Imperial Way faction, paradoxically resulted in the strengthening of the military's overall influence, particularly the control faction, Toziya, leading to the complete domination of the government by the armed forces. On July 7, 1937, Japan manufactured the Marco Polo Bridge Incident, launching a full-scale invasion of China, the Second Sino-Japanese War. Japan expected a swift victory, but met fierce Chinese resistance, bogging the war down into a protracted conflict. To sustain the massive war effort, Japan implemented a harsh wartime regime at home, placing the economy under strict state control, severely restricting civilian life, and suppressing freedom of thought and speech. In 1940, Japan signed the Tripartite Pact with Germany and Italy, forming the Axis powers. Seeking vital resources like oil and rubber from Southeast Asia and aiming to cut off Western aid to China, Japan decided on southward expansion. On December 7, 1941, December 8th in Japan launched a surprise attack on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor, simultaneously invading British, American, and Dutch colonies in Southeast Asia, thus igniting the Pacific War. Initially, Japanese forces achieved rapid victories across a vast area. However, as the industrial might of the United States and its allies mobilized, and Japan's own resources dwindled, the tide of war turned. Beginning with the Battle of Midway, 1942, Japanese forces suffered continuous defeats. Allied forces implemented an island-hopping strategy, steadily advancing towards the Japanese home islands. On the home front, civilian life grew increasingly difficult, and major cities suffered devastating Allied bombing raids. Despite inevitable defeat, Japan's militarist government stubbornly continued the war, even preparing for a decisive battle on the home islands. To force a quick surrender and minimize Allied casualties, the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima, August 6, 1945, and Nagasaki, August 9, 1945. On August 8th, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan and invaded Manchuria. Facing utter ruin and internal collapse, Emperor Showa, Hirohito, finally announced Japan's acceptance of the Potsdam Declaration via radio broadcast on August 15th, signifying unconditional surrender. World War II ended with the complete defeat of the Axis powers. The aggressive war launched by Japanese militarism brought immense suffering to the peoples of Asia and resulted in devastating consequences for Japan itself, leaving the nation in ruins. Chapter 6: Post-War Rebirth and Modern Japan, Peaceful Development, Economic Miracle and New Era Challenges. August 15, 1945 marked Japan's unconditional surrender, ending its militarist history and ushering in a new era of post-war reconstruction and peaceful development. From 1945 to 1952, Japan was under Allied occupation, primarily led by the United States. The Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers, SCAP, headed by General Douglas MacArthur, effectively governed Japan. The core objectives of the occupation were the demilitarization and democratization of Japan to ensure it would never again pose a threat to world peace. To achieve these goals, SCAP implemented a series of profound reforms. Demilitarization, disbanding the Japanese armed forces, dismantling military installations, and purging militarist leaders, including war crimes trials like the Tokyo trial. Prohibiting Japan from possessing war potential. Democratization reforms. New Constitution. The Constitution of Japan, often called the Peace Constitution, was promulgated on November 3, 1946, and came into effect on May 3, 1947. It established three core principles: popular sovereignty, respect for fundamental human rights, and pacifism. It explicitly defined the emperor as the symbol of the state and of the unity of the people, deriving his position from the will of the people, with no political power. Most notably, Article 9 renounced war as a sovereign right of the nation and the threat or use of force as means of settling international disputes, stating that land, sea, and air forces, as well as other war potential, will never be maintained. The right of belligerency of the state will not be recognized. This constitution became the cornerstone of Japan's post-war peaceful and democratic system. Guaranteeing human rights and freedoms, granted citizens extensive rights and freedoms, including freedom of speech, assembly, association, and religion. Significantly, women were granted suffrage and greater social standing. Educational reform abolished the pre-war militaristic education system, introducing a new system based on democratic and pacifist principles. Dissolution of zaibatsu forcibly dissolved the large family-controlled industrial and financial conglomerates, zaibatsu, that had collaborated with the militarist government, aiming to democratize the economy and promote competition. Land reform compulsorily purchased excess land from landlords and sold it cheaply to tenant farmers, effectively realizing land to the tiller. This destroyed the rural feudal landlord system, stabilized society, and expanded the domestic market. Labor reform enacted laws like the Labor Standards Act and the Trade Union Act, guaranteeing workers' rights and encouraging the development of labor unions. These reforms fundamentally reshaped Japan's political, economic, and social structure, laying a solid foundation for its post-war recovery and development. In 1951, Japan signed the San Francisco Peace Treaty with 48 nations, formally ending the occupation. Concurrently, the U.S.-Japan Security Treaty was signed, allowing U.S. forces to be stationed in Japan and integrating Japan into the U.S. Cold War security framework. On April 28, 1952, the San Francisco Peace Treaty took effect and Japan regained its sovereignty. After regaining independence, Japan focused intensely on economic development. Leveraging its pre-war industrial base, highly educated workforce, aggressive adoption and adaptation of foreign technology, effective government industrial policies, guided by ministries like MITI, Ministry of International Trade and Industry, and the economic stimulus provided by the Korean War, 1950 to 1953, special procurement boom, the Japanese economy entered a golden era of high-speed growth. From the mid-1950s to the early 1970s, Japan achieved average annual growth rates of around 10%, creating the globally acclaimed economic miracle. Manufacturing industries, particularly automobiles, electronics, steel, and shipbuilding, surged, with Japanese products flooding world markets. Made in Japan became synonymous with high quality. The successful hosting of the Tokyo Olympics in 1964 showcased the nation's post-war resurgence to the world. By 1968, Japan's gross national product, GNP, surpassed that of West Germany, making it the second-largest economy in the capitalist world. Living standards rose dramatically, with the three sacred treasures, television, refrigerator, and washing machine, becoming common household items, leading to the rapid expansion of the middle class and a prevailing social consciousness of being 100 million all-middle class, Ikyoku Sekiryu. Politically, post-war Japan saw the establishment of the 1955 system, characterized by the long-term dominance of the conservative Liberal Democratic Party, LDP, formed in 1955 by the merger of the Liberal and Democratic parties, and confrontation with opposition parties like the Japan Socialist Party, JSP. The LDP maintained power for decades, largely due to its success in managing economic growth and providing political stability, ensuring policy continuity. The US-Japan alliance remained the cornerstone of Japanese foreign policy, but as its economic strength grew, Japan began seeking a more active role in international affairs. It joined the United Nations in 1956. In 1972, Prime Minister Tanaka Kakuei visited China, achieving the normalization of Sino-Japanese diplomatic relations. However, rapid growth also brought negative consequences. Severe industrial pollution led to tragic public health crises like Minamata disease and Itai disease, prompting government and industry to address environmental protection. Rapid urbanization caused overconcentration of population in major cities, leading to housing shortages and traffic congestion. The first oil crisis in 1973 dealt a major blow to Japan's energy-dependent economy, forcing industrial restructuring towards energy conservation and technology-intensive sectors. By the 1980s, Japan's economic power reached its peak. Its strong export competitiveness led to massive trade surpluses, but also fueled trade friction with the United States and other countries. To cope with the appreciating yen and stimulate domestic demand, Japan adopted loose monetary policies, channeling vast amounts of capital into the stock and real estate markets, inflating a massive asset bubble known as the bubble economy. During this period, Japanese society experienced unprecedented prosperity, marked by lavish consumption and widespread optimism. This boom, however, was short-lived. In the early 1990s, as the government tightened monetary policy, the bubble burst. The Japanese economy plunged into a prolonged period of stagnation and deflation, famously dubbed the Lost Decade, later extended to the Lost 2 decades or longer. Stock and land prices plummeted, leaving corporations and banks burdened with massive bad debts. Economic growth faltered, and unemployment rose. The long-ruling LDP briefly lost power in 1993. Although it later returned, the 1955 system had effectively collapsed, ushering in an era of multi-party competition and coalition governments. Against the backdrop of economic malaise and social transition, Japanese society faced new challenges. The Great Hanshin Earthquake, Kobe Earthquake, in 1995 and the Aum Shinrikyo sarin gas attack on the Tokyo subway in the same year deeply shocked the nation and created a sense of unease. The problems of a declining birth rate, Shoshika, and an aging population, Kurika, became increasingly severe, posing long-term challenges to the labor supply, social security system, and economic vitality. Widening disparities in wealth led to the emergence of the Gap Society, Kakusa Shakai, as a major social issue. Despite these challenges, Japan in the 21st century remains a leading global power in economics, technology, and culture. It maintains strong competitiveness in high-tech fields such as automobiles, electronics, robotics, and advanced materials. Its unique culture, including anime, manga, video games, cuisine, and fashion design, enjoys widespread global influence, constituting significant soft power. On the international stage, Japan continues to adhere to pacifist principles, actively participating in international peacekeeping, humanitarian aid, and global governance. At the same time, it seeks a role more commensurate with its national strength in the changing global landscape, advocating for UN reform and strengthening ties with neighboring countries and other major powers. In recent years, debates about revising Article 9 of the Constitution to allow for more normal military capabilities have persisted, reflecting deep reflection and adjustments regarding Japan's security environment and international role. The Great East Japan earthquake, tsunami, and subsequent Fukushima nuclear disaster in 2011 brought immense trauma and severe tests, prompting profound reassessment of energy policy and disaster management. Entering the Reiwa era, starting 2019, Japanese society continues to grapple with internal challenges like economic revitalization, demographic shifts, and social security reform, while also navigating an increasingly complex geopolitical environment and global issues such as climate change and pandemics. Balancing tradition and modernity, heritage and innovation, domestic development and international contribution remains a crucial ongoing task for contemporary Japan. From the ancient whispers of the Jaman to the pulse of modern metropolises, the long river of Japanese history continues to flow, writing its own unique and evolving chapter. Conclusion. Thank you for listening as we journeyed together through the vast and dramatic tapestry of Japanese history, from ancient times to the present day. If you enjoyed this content and wish to explore more stories about history and culture, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss our future exciting updates. We look forward to meeting you again in our next episode.